ready to get started.
I still love I wish I had
Hey guys! Quiet down!
Thank you, Christina.
Teach your voice.
Welcome to the Toys and Pen Bookstore. I'm John Charles. I'd like to introduce our authors this afternoon. We have Christina Dodd, Allison Brennan, and Elle Owens. Both have new books out for you today. We do have copies up front. For virtual audience members tuning in, we're happy to ship copies of any of the authors' books. Just go online or give us a call at the Poison Pen Bookstore. And please join me in welcoming Christina, Allison, and Elle. My first question for each of you, and we'll start with you, Elle, is before you became a published writer, you were a person. What was that person like?
What was the person like?
Yeah.
I don't know if I would say a full person. Honestly, probably the same as I am now. A little bit chaotic, and just my mind never stops. And so before, I don't know what I would channel the energy to. It probably wasn't productive, but then writing was a great way to channel that brain that doesn't shut off.
What about you, Allison? I remember something about politics.
Sort of. I worked in the California State Legislature, and I worked as basically a constituent consultant. So I helped all the members, regardless of party, how to use their proprietary computer system to communicate with their constituents. So, you know, how do you track them and all that kind of fun stuff. And yeah, I ended up, and I was a mom, and I still am a mom. But yeah, I definitely much prefer writing fiction.
Christina, you did something boring with math?
I was a draftsman. I designed roads, mines, and sawmills, and yes, I can actually probably one of the few people in the room that can multiply and divide fractions because I was doing it before. Okay, there you go.
You go, we have to teach it.
Because I was doing it before calculators. I mean, right, and they were just coming in, and I mean, it was like, oh my god. But yeah.
What was it like getting your first book published?
It happened, I wasn't excited at all. It was February 2nd, 3:30 at 1990, and we went to Disney World on the Advance.
I remember when I got the call from my agent, I was driving to work in the capital, and you know, New York is 3 hours ahead. And I was driving in, and she said, we got a deal, we got, you know, da-da-da, and she was explaining it, and she talks really, really fast. She's no longer my agent, but not because she talks fast. But it was like, and I'm like, are you serious? Are you serious? Really? I mean, it's like, it took the entire drive commute to realize, oh my gosh, I just sold a book. I couldn't believe it, and it blew me away. It also actually was in February, no, maybe it was March. Early March of 2004. I didn't think about that.
You just can't.
So mine is a little bit more dramatic. So I have been writing romance under a different name for quite some time, and so the resilience of being a writer, like you get rejected 1,000 times, and so the agent I used to have, I sent this thriller book, Tell Me You Trust Me, the one that's out now. I sent it to her, and it sat for 6 months, and she's like, no, I don't think you're ready, like I don't think this is it. And we went back and forth for a year, and finally I got to the point where I was like, I really just believe in it. Like she didn't give me any criticism of why it wasn't ready, like any constructive, and so I was like, hey, I kind of want to go to a different agent. Like I really, I want to chase this. I want to be a thriller author besides just romance. And so one weekend I sent out a query, a letter, right, a proposal, like, hey, here's my story to a different agent. I went just to my top agents, like, you know, my dream 5, and within 24 hours, one responded, was like, I want your whole story. And then a week later, she was like, I want to represent you. And then 2 months later, I had a deal with Amazon. And so, yeah, it was very dramatic. But after sitting for a year of like, oh, I don't know if it's ready. So it's just that trusting your gut of like, no, like I do want to fight for it. So, and I don't remember the month though. I know it was 2 years ago, I think, because it takes forever for a book to come out. But I just remember I was so glad I followed my gut on that instead of just sitting passive.
Let's talk about the book that brought you here today, your current release. Christina, Girl Anonymous, what do you want readers to know about the book? And I will preface this by saying, You're one of my favorite authors in the world, but it is completely bonkers plot.
That was gonna be what I let them. Why is it bonkers? I have no idea.
A mafia family, a cursed artifact, you know, this crazy group of people that live in the neighborhood. You tell me. But you make it work, but it's like, I'm surprised you got it past your editor.
Actually, they were really enthused about it. The whole thing started when I was watching The Godfather 2. And in The Godfather 2, Michael Corleone, who's the head of the family, is dancing with his wife, and she says, "You told me that in 5 years this family would be totally legitimate, and that was 7 years ago." Which I thought was something you could really relate to, because if you actually are gonna take a mob family straight, what are you talking about? I mean, you're talking about some really indignant family members who are making a ton of money and probably enjoy violence, and they know how to shoot people, and there's a good chance they're gonna try and shoot you. And so that was the whole genesis of the story. And then all of the other bonker stuff came in later.
Allison, what about your latest release?
See How They Hide is the 6th book in the Quinn and Costa series. It stands alone. It's a complete mystery. I always say that. Some people like to read series from the very beginning. What grows are the characters, because it's the same team of FBI agents. This one, when I was trying to come up with the next idea after the last one, which kind of finished a little story arc, I was saying, I don't know what I'm going to do. They're all in a good place. You know, it's like, how am I going to, shake things up without having drama all the time? And I said, what if I had to split the team up? And so they have to investigate. And I said, 2 murders, opposite coasts, happened at the same time. Oh, wonder why. I had no idea why, because I didn't plot. And I said, that'll be fun. So I could split my team up, and one is investigating in Virginia, one is investigating in Oregon, and then the 2 cases come together in Colorado. So the whole team is back together in Colorado.
Before we go into Elle, tell us a little bit about their investigations, because they're kind of a unique team.
Yeah, so this storyline came about, I participated in the FBI Citizens Academy, and back in Sacramento in 2008. And they have something called the Evidence Response Team, which is a group of FBI agents that have a specialty. And they get specially trained, and then they will go anywhere in that jurisdiction. And I learned about it because the ERT investigated the Yosemite murders, which was the Carrie Stainer, and he killed 3 women, a mom and a daughter and their friend. And that's how I learned about the team. And I said, that would be so much fun to write about something like that, except I didn't want to be held to one place. So I created the Mobile Response Team, which is the best of the best, and they travel all around the country to small communities that may not have the resources to be able to investigate an odd or complex crime. So for example, in this book, one of the murders takes place in Ashland, Oregon, which is where one of my daughters went to college. And so I know the area really well. It's very small, 21,000 people live there, and they found a body covered with red poppies. And then the same body, or not the same body, but a similar murder in a teeny little town in Virginia.
Elle, what can you tell us about your debut suspense novel?
But for the record, these now just sound incredible, and so I just forgot that I was on a panel. And Tell Me You Trust Me, my favorite thing that kicked it off is just like when all of us were in the times of COVID, right, when we were at home. That's when the story originally came to me. I don't know if any of you use Spotify or stream music, and you can share your playlists with friends or family. And so during lockdown, somewhere between 2020 and 2022, my friends and I all shared our Spotify with each other as just a way to check in, right? We were all feeling kind of isolated and lonely. I just had my first kid, 6 months old at the time, and so we would see what we were listening to, and then it kind of came like a joke of for me, jock jams. Yeah. I talk about jock jams all the time. That is if I am stressed or if I'm kind of having a bad day, I need that to change my mood. And so they would see me listening to jock jams every day, and they're are you okay? Do you need to go for a walk outside? And so I took the root of that, and I was what if I made this as dark as possible? essentially, and took my family unit at that time. So I get asked a lot of like, oh my gosh, is that based on your family? Only in the sense of I have parents, I have a brother, and I have a husband. Like that's the only similarity. But I took my route, and then just what if the only way you could communicate with someone who you've been with for 10 years, who you think you know everything, was through song titles. And so, and how, do you think you know someone after 10 years? What secrets can you hide? And then after listening to both of your introductions, I should have said more than just I'm chaotic, but I work in technology for my day job, and most of my job is explaining technical concepts to people who don't necessarily need to understand the back end. And so that process, I mean, I do that every single day, and so being able to weave that into a story was really fun, because there's so many, with all of the tracking and how we know where everyone is now, there are ways to hide things, and I really wanted to explore that. And then again, make it just worst case scenario.
It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's brilliantly done. And I have to say, even if you don't care about technology, I don't. It's just it's like, it really was cleverly done. Let's talk about the writing process, because suspense novels do require certain plot points as you go through the story. When you're sitting down to write your suspense in thriller novels, how does that work? Christina, do you know what's going to happen?
I know most things that are going to happen. Sometimes things go left or right or whatever. I frequently don't know, and in fact did not know in Girl Anonymous who the bad guy was. It helps if I set up a bunch of different
Scenarios?
scenarios, a bunch of different red herrings, and then get about halfway, 3/4 of the way through and go, okay, it's this one. So my main response when people say it's obvious from the beginning, I'm like, I wish I had. But yeah, I'm not a seat of the pants writer. I am a person who does a synopsis.
I hate writing the synopsis. And in fact, my synopses, when I send them to my agent, he always has to, you have to add a little more, you have to add a little more. It's basically all backstory. So I'll send 3 pages, and it's all of the backstory that sets up the story, and I'll have like 1 paragraph about what's going to happen in the book, because I don't know, and I don't want to be held to anything. And I remember I had to write a synopsis with an editor who I no longer have, and she just kept having me write it and rewrite it and rewrite it. And I said, well, it's going to be one of these 3 people, or it's going to be the bad guy. And she goes, well, who? I said, I don't know until I write it. And I will say, after writing that synopsis over and over and over again, I didn't even want to write the book.
Oh.
And it was really, really depressing. The book ended up being good, but it was a difficult book to write because I knew what was going to happen. You know what? If I know who the killer is, it's no fun. I want to investigate with my characters, so I know the setup, and I know the characters that are going to be involved, because I write mostly a series. And then I just kind of see where it goes. I was like, John read one of my books that comes out later this year, and it's a straight up mystery with Amateur Sleuth, and I did not know who the killer was until I was probably 3/4 of the way, and then I knew it was one of 2 people. And then I said, okay, it's one of 2 people, and then one of those people ends up dead. So I said, okay, it has to be the other one. And then literally and that was so much fun for me.
There's definitely a theme here, because I also did not know who was going to be in charge of everything. And if I know some people are still mid-reading, so I don't want to do any spoilers. But yeah, I also like discovering as I go, and then, because that's what revisions are for, right? If you plan, at one point though, I did lose point of the plot and did not know who was doing what, and so I did have to delete some chapters and redo them, because it just lost control. It just went off the tracks. But I think it's fun though to explore the characters, or if someone does end up dead. I do know that one of the characters that I really wanted to be really ambiguous, and so there is one at the end where you really don't know if they were good or bad, or if they're just kind of in the gray. And so I think I could try to keep all of them in the gray, so then at the end I could figure out who needed to be the villain.
Your current books all fall into suspense thriller genre. What do you think are the key requirements you as an author need to deliver in those kinds of books?
This is my first one, so I'm not going to answer this question. I'm going to let you 2 go first.
This is like my 20th one, but I'm gonna let her go first.
Well,
I think
I
it's
get-
about pacing.
yeah, I think all thrillers are about pacing, but I think for me, it's if I'm bored, my readers are going to be bored. So if I am like starting to write, and actually yesterday I wrote this chapter, and it's a really, really good chapter, but it just went on too long, and I'm like, wait, okay, I put little notes to myself. I said, like at the very top of the chapter, condense, and then I go on to the next chapter, because it was a really good chapter, and it ended really strong, but it was like 12 pages, and it probably needed to be about 8. And so I'll make those little notes to myself, because like you said, revisions, that's an important thing. But if I'm bored, my readers are going to be bored. And so I have to be interested in the story, because I primarily write to entertain. I mean, I want people, I know they're going to invest anywhere, from, 6 to 10 hours reading a book or listening to a book. I want them to close the page, the end of the book, and say, oh, that was my time well spent.
That was a good answer.
It's thoughtful.
Oh, you're gonna make me answer
I
it.
am going to make it.
If I'm having a good time, and I have to tell you, I had so much fun with this book. I'm figure everybody else will be too, and this is very much more of a romantic suspense than my usual later suspenses, and I didn't know how it was going to go over, because most of my readers now that are reading me for suspense are are expecting straight suspense, and there's a lot more sex, I will tell you right now. Just be warned. And it's getting good reviews, and people seem to like it. I'm getting nice letters, and I'm thinking this is very, very interesting to see that people were willing to make that switch with me.
Anything else?
The only thing that I think I would add is trying to, so I am an avid reader. I read constantly, and so I want to be entertained. I want to be sucked in. I have 1,000 different things going on. I'm still trying to balance a full-time job and then 2 young kids, and so when I read, I have to be, like, hooks are in my skin. That sounded aggressive. But, like, hooks in my skin where, like, I can't stop. And so I tried really hard to end every chapter where you're, like, annoyed. Because you can't just, like, if there's a chapter that's slow, then you're like, oh, I'll just set it down and pick it up tomorrow. And, like, because if I do that, sometimes I just won't pick up the book. Because I have so much going on. But I tried to have every chapter end with, like, oh, damn it, I have to keep reading. And so, because I need that as a reader.
Very good.
Let's talk a little bit about literary brands, because that's a big thing in publishing. An author's voice is what I like to call it. Elle, you have chosen to write different kinds of books under different names as a clue to your reader, but I think your voice stays consistent. And same thing with you, Christina. You kept the same name, but you write different kinds of books. Allison, you're kind of in the middle. You write a range of suspense and things like that, and some fringe kind of element type books. How would you describe your voice? Because that's consistent in the books. Well, let's start
Okay,
with you.
I guess I'll answer. I nearly killed my career 15 years ago when I wrote 3 supernatural thrillers. Well, I wrote 2 supernatural thrillers. The third one was canceled by my publisher. And it was funny, my editor, she loved them. She said, this sounds like you, but it's paranormal. And she says, but it's still your voice. And the book literally started with a cop finding a dead body on a cliff, which is something that I would normally write, only they didn't know how she died. There was no signs of violence. The autopsy, she's a healthy teenage girl. How did she die? Well, yeah, there were paranormal elements and there's demons and everything, but it still sounded like me. The books did not do well. My readers did not follow me, and I wish that I had had a pen name. If I had had a pen name, I think the books would have done much, much better. Because my readers did not want the woo-woo. That's what I call it, the woo-woo. And but my voice stayed the same. I mean, I think if you picked up Original Sin, which please don't, because it is about to go out of print, and then I get my rights back. So don't buy it.
Will you publish book 3 like that?
I self-published the third book just to.
Oh,
it was
it's already out.
Yeah, I self-published it, and it did not sell very well. But okay, this is why I self-published it. Mortal Sin was supposed to be the third book, and I wanted to wrap up the series. It's supposed to be a 7-book series. So 7 Deadly Sins, 7 Deadly Sins, got it down. And so the third book, I said, okay, I'm going to wrap up everything into this one big book, and kind of so that I gave my readers closure. Well, 5,000 people bought that book, which, yay, I'm glad, but that was only 5,000 people. I know why they canceled the series. And, so at least I gave them a little bit of closure with that book. But had I done it under a pen name, I think it would have sold better, and I would not have nearly killed my career, which I resurrected by writing Lucy Kincaid, who has 18 books, and she literally, saved my career, and I went back to my roots. And so that's...
But I'll be reading the paranormals.
Go right ahead. As long as
I will wait for you to stop. But I love
you can probably buy Muse, stuff like that. unless there's one here at the Poison Pen. Then you can
Christina, because your voice, I read a lot of your books, it's the same. Historical romance, contemporary romance, paranormals.
Like Allison, I've certainly tried to kill my career many, many times. And I just keep on writing, and somehow I keep on getting published. My latest madness was I was plotting with my daughter, and because my kids have been plotting with me their entire lives, and I said I would like to write a book in a familiar literary universe like Pride and Prejudice. And she promptly said, The Daughter of Romeo and Juliet. And I said, brilliantly, I said, but they're dead. Okay, people, they were never alive. It's fiction. So I sat down and I wrote the first 4 pages, which is substantially what Daughter of Fair Verona is today. And then I put it down because I said, nobody's going to buy this. This is ridiculous. And I wrote it first person. Never written first person in my entire life. You want me to keep going? So I was back and forth with Jane Ann Krentz and Susan Elizabeth Phillips and email, and Susan afterwards wrote me and said, you're funny, you should write rom-com. And I got really sarcastic at this point and said, yeah, because I've written historical romance and paranormal romance and romantic suspense and suspense. I should definitely go ahead and change genres again. And then I thought of The Daughter of Romeo and Juliet, and I wrote her back and I said, so how do you write rom-com? And she said something like, smartass. She said something like, boy and girl meet, boy and girl fall in love, and boy and girl have problems and get married. And then she said, duh. So I wrote her back and I said, well then why don't you write faster if it's that easy? And she called me a bad name. Then I called Jane and I told her about it. She said, send us the pages. So I did, and that's why the book was actually written, and that's why it was published, because they said, you've got to finish this thing. But I mean, it is completely...
It's you.
Oh, the voice is me. There's no doubt about it, but it is first person, and it is... when I handed it to you, John, to read the pages, you said nobody's buying historical mystery.
I did not.
Yes, you did.
You're mixing me up with something else.
You're in denial. I thought you were going to throw it in the air in joy, and you definitely did not. So
I would reference a certain review.
no, I know. Once you read the whole thing, you seem to be favorable. And
more than favorable, but
yeah, yes, thank you for the review. It really helps because the librarians love it. And interestingly enough, high school teachers who are teaching teenagers Shakespeare are like so excited. I can't begin to tell you. It's really quite the thing. But it's been a thing, guys. It's a great way to kill your career over and over. But if you keep writing, sooner or later you're like on your feet.
Elle, even though you have 2 pen names, I see the same voice in both, because there's humor in your romances.
I'm just so funny.
It's a dry humor. It's a little bit dark. It's a little bit sharp. But that's in your romances. It's in the new suspense novel too.
So I feel like I feel like I am a little dark. I am. Sharp sounds weird because it feels like I'm complimenting myself, but I was recently told from someone that who knows me personally and who has read my books is like, man, you are in every single book, and so I've started using that as a marketing tactic of if we meet or if we get along or if you've laughed at something I've said, you should buy my book today because it is my books are just a book version of me. Obviously the characters are all different and I definitely think those out. The plot, no, but characters, yes. And so, yeah, it's just, I'm really sarcastic and bantery, and I like reading that, I like writing that, I think that's human nature. What is interesting, though, is I have only written first person, past tense, so I've never written third person, And so that is interesting. We're saying that was the first time you had to write first point of view. So I don't know if I could sit down and write third. I've probably written 20 books total between romance and thriller, and I don't know if I could go do that. Because that just would not feel that would not feel natural for me.
I wrote my first person book that comes out in June, and it's book number 49.
Wow,
Oh,
good
wow.
for you.
And it's the first in first person, so.
Did you fall right into it?
Actually, I wrote the first 100 pages in third because that's what I've always done, and I said this isn't working, so I rewrote it in first, and I said, oh, that's it. And then
Wow,
I wrote
good
the
for
rest of the
you.
book that way.
Let's talk about your experiences with publishing, because you each have different experiences. Elle, you're what we call hybrid, because you've
Yes.
done books with traditional publishers, books yourself. Can you talk a little bit about that and why you chose that route?
So yeah, there's quite a few routes there. That was very unpolished of me. So I like being hybrid because I'm kind of a control freak, and I also don't like how slow traditional publishing is. And so traditional publishers are where your books are in bookstores, they're in the stores, they're in airports, where you're with a publisher and your distribution is a lot wider. There's so many benefits to that. The advances definitely, like the money you get for it is definitely different where you're at in your career. And so for me, because I still have a day job, I do not make enough with traditional publishing for me to pursue writing full time. And so my romances, my traditional romances, and then my thriller are all through a traditional route. But it's not necessarily enough where I don't make enough with it because this is not where I'm at in my career. But when I self-publish, I'm in control of everything, which is really daunting. Like, it is exhausting. I swear I have 2 full-time jobs, like every weekend. Yesterday, I think I worked 8 hours, just because you have to do everything from writing to hiring, editing to cover to marketing. It is a full-time job. I could quit my 9 to 5 and do this and actually work more. And so, but because I'm able to control the sales, I'm able to be like, oh, I'm going to do a free day for one day, and then on book 1, which drives sales to book 2, that I'm able to see those monthly royalties, or that is more consistent. But I also love being in both worlds because the exposure. I would never have been introduced to Poison Pen, to this experience if I wasn't traditionally published, because it is a little bit different. And just my agent and I were talking, especially as we're negotiating book 2 for my thriller world, different world, but just my second thriller, is I want to remain hybrid. I don't want to go full in on either route. I like staying in the middle. You could also say I have commitment issues, and so I would just like to keep my options open, just because the trends, right? I happened to be writing sports romance before hockey romance took off. So if you're not aware, hockey romance exploded the last 3 years with Book Talk and TikTok. And I'd already been writing sports romance under my author name. And so I just happened to be sitting with a huge backlist of sports romances when that took off, which was incredible. But now that trend is going down, and so now my sales with those books are going down. So because it's so, you can't have all of your eggs in one basket. I hate that my dad was right. Like, that part hurts, right? Like, you can't just, it's such a dadism, but yeah, he was right. And so now trying to diversify because that income can be so inconsistent. Because ideally, I would like to be a full-time author. That is my end goal. That is my dream. My family's sick of hearing me talk about it. But that is I'm on the path to do that.
Okay, 2 follow-up questions before we go on. Why hockey? What is this whole thing about? Readers, romance readers, and that.
I don't know. Hockey's just, I'm on video, but like hockey players are just like hotter than football, but it's still aggressive. So I think that's it.
Okay.
So
And you're seeing the trend go down towards sports romances?
a little bit, yep.
Okay.
It's super oversaturated right now. It is. There's nothing. Again, I don't often read in the genre I write for romance, but like sports romance, I don't often read them. But if I were to go try to find a hockey romance, there would be hundreds of them now, and there's not that element, that standout element like there was 3 years ago.
Allison, what is your experiences in publishing?
Well, I'll say my sister-in-law loves hockey, so I now I know why. Well, let's see. I'll be published for 20 years in January, so I'm coming
That's
to my 20-year anniversary. Yay! And I went the traditional route. I sent query letters to agents, got tons and tons of rejections, said, that's okay, I'm writing another book. This book will be better. And so I sold my 5th book and just got an agent. She sold my book, and I quit my job. Now, I know not everybody can quit their job. This was a leap of faith. I also have a husband, and he had benefits. So it was like, okay, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to have to do really well and get another contract so I don't have to crawl back to my boss and beg for my job back. So I had like that, like a year and a half buffer where I was able to, okay, I got an advance. Of course, it goes. I bought with my first advance. You went to Disneyland. I bought a dining room table because we had this little small table that sat 4, and we had 5 kids. And so that was 7 people around a little teeny table. So we bought a table that could actually seat 8 people. It was $800, and I don't think I'd ever spent $800 on a piece of furniture. And, anyway, so that was kind of the thing. Fortunately, the books did well. I was published first with Ballantine. They published them back to back, and that ended up hitting the New York Times list. So I got a second contract, and they did those back to back. And those hit way back in the dark ages when they had a mass market print list. They hit the mass market print list. And so I was able to definitely not have to crawl back begging for my job. And ended up writing usually 3 books a year and sometimes 2.
Christina, you've been doing this a while. We won't say how long.
Oh, go ahead.
No.
35 years.
Wow.
Yay!
You've experienced publishing, go through many different phases. What I've wondered is, you write different kinds of books. Was it a conscious choice when you see paranormal romances, I need to slide into that, or is that just you doing what you want to do and timing it right?
Oh no, I don't time it right. No, like with the paranormals, I was reading paranormal romance and I really enjoyed it. That's why I jumped onto it. And so then I started plotting them. That's what you do when you're a writer. Is you start thinking, how can I create this story? What is it that I prefer about vampires or paranormal creatures or whatever? And so then that was how I got into that. It was just, and my publisher was not happy about me writing it at all because I was writing romantic suspense at the time, and they seldom want you to change genres. It's one of those things that Nixon and say. Fortunately, my paranormals really did do well. I think they're my biggest selling books, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I've changed just because I've been in the business for so long, and I write books for a while. I wrote 25 more than that, probably historical romances, and after a while I felt like I was plagiarizing myself. And so I just kind of said, well, what else do I like to read? And then I started, writing romantic suspense, and for me it's always a new learning curve. I'm always learning something new about writing when I change genres, and that's really the part I enjoy. It's so much fun.
Let's talk a little bit about each of you as readers, because you're not just writers, you're readers. We'll start with you, Elle. I'm going to take a shot in the dark and say that Harlan Coben is one of your favorite authors.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, absolutely. And then Riley Sager is also another one. And then I'm blank, the Ruth Ware.
Oh,
Yeah. So those, and then Darby Kane. I don't know if anyone has read Darby Kane. She is a romance and thriller author with 2 names. And so she is another one that I just, honestly, I read her books and then read, just like how we kind of obsess when you find an author you love, you go online and just read everything you can about them. And so with Darby Kane, I learned she was a romance author first before a thriller, and that was like what kicked me in the ass to be like, hey, you can do it too. And so, I would message her, I even thanked her in the acknowledgments because she was so kind, and I asked her all sorts of questions before trying to do this. And so, but yeah, that's the other cool part about being an author is everyone is so nice and helpful and supportive. One of my favorite things to say is, or not to say, it was not my quote, so let me just preface that, but when you're an author, it's not like there's a limited number of chairs at the table, right? There's not just 4 chairs at the table. It's like when more people are successful, you just bring in more readers, which is more success for other authors. And so, again, just also thanking you both for helping me do this at the thriller debut event. So yeah, that was off task, but yeah, my favorite authors. So those are my favorite authors.
Well, for readers who haven't read Tell Me You Trust Me, Harlan shows up there too. Allison, what about you?
Well, you're right. Absolutely, that quote. Lisa Gardner kind of told me the same thing. She says there's always room for more authors, and because you'll always be bringing in more readers. And she's one of my favorites. I've read probably everything she's written, or nearly. Robert Crace is another favorite. I love the Joe Pike, Elvis Cole series. recently, when I was writing my lighter romantic mystery, I thought I discovered, but of course everybody read her first. Lucy Score has a paranormal series called the Riley. Have you read the Riley Thorne books?
No, but she,
Oh, you will love it.
my God, she just has been, all of a sudden, I'm like, Lucy scored one, scored. I'm, yes,
Oh, my-
I got one of them.
Riley
I just
Thorne.
haven't
Oh
had
my
time.
gosh, they're this reluctant psychic.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, I got it on audiobook and listened to it. I mean, my daughter could tell you, I was laughing as I'm listening to it, just laughing out loud. So I listened to all 4 of them in like 1 week. And now I'm mad that she's like now writing books that sell better because it's like, I want the 5th book. And then there was another author, Elle Cosamono, who I just was here with, and she probably still has some signed books here. I read her first book, the Finley Donovan is Killing It. And it's like, oh my gosh, I got to get all the other books. And I was, fantastic series. So I like a little bit of everything. I'm not really into historicals, sorry. I don't read a lot of historicals, and I don't read paranormal that is not grounded in reality. And I know that sounds weird, but I do believe in demons, so I could read about demons and I could read about magic and things like that, but I can't read about like, vampires and werewolves and things like that. Does that sound bizarre? I don't know.
Yes, but writers are bizarre, so.
You would know.
Christina, what about you? And I should remind you that there's probably someone listening in that you better mention.
My favorites are Jane Ann Krentz and Susan Elizabeth. Right now what I'm reading is the Thursday Afternoon Murder Club.
No, Richard Osman.
Yeah, I got to page 10 and laughed out loud, and I have to tell you, I was in. I'm reading it. I'm really enjoying it. I'm reading Elle. I'm not even halfway through, but it's such an interesting setup. And the heroine starts out, and I'm sorry, she's such a wet blanket. Honestly, you're just like, oh, come on. I mean, she gets over it really fast. She starts in on this, tracking this situation down. She's so smart and really likable, and you get to grow with her. So that's character growth. I love that.
Just on that point, so my husband does not read any of my stories, not the romance. It's just the one time he did. He had so many comments. Like, they're like talking so much. I'm like, yeah, just don't, we're not gonna read that. So we tried reading a thriller, and he was like, this just like, is that she's just like, you're like really strong as a woman, and she's like such a wet blanket. I was like, it's not me. Like, this is not like, you didn't disappear on me. Like, what? I was like, yeah, but I'm just not used to like hearing like a weak voice. I was like, oh my god, like you don't. I love him. He does not read, and so he can read. His mom is here, so he can read. And his sister. It's fine. But no, he just doesn't read often, and so there's just beats and parts of books that we're all readers, and so and where dialogue is big in romance, it might not be in the nonfiction sports books he reads. I don't know. We do not share books, but he was just like so thrown off about how weak this character was. But I was like, that is the point. There is growth. She overcomes it. It's not an autobiography.
We're here today to talk about your latest book, but my next question, you can say as little or as much as you'd like. What's next for you as an author? Let's start with you, Christina.
Next, I've got 2 things coming up from the Daughter of Montague series. One of them is a novella, and I volunteered to do this because I thought it would be really fun and short, and it ended up 26,000 words, which is really a long novella. It's very meaty. Oh, my husband's holding up the cover. See, that's why I keep him around. And that's coming out April 22nd, which is my mom's birthday. And it is also, as you all know, the day before Shakespeare Day. And then I also have Thus With a Kiss I Die, which we're giving away. This is that full-length novel. And we're giving away 2 arts today to one of you who are here, and then somebody who's going to ask questions online. So.
Allison, what's next for you? I and say it's a wonderful effort.
Thank you very much. John always says that he never gets the actual books, that somebody else in the store gets them before him. So I made sure that my publisher was going to send him his own copy, and then he ended up reading the bound galley, which is not very pretty, but I really appreciate it. So I have a romantic mystery coming out, which is a very different than my suspense novels, and it's called Beach Reads and Deadly Deeds, and it's about it's also in first person, which I've never done before, and she is an accountant who goes on vacation to a resort and discovers clues to in the book to a crime that she picked up at the bookstore, and she's reading on the beach. So it's, there's a romance, there's definitely a mystery, and it's an amateur sleuth. So it has something for everything. I won't call it a cozy because there are bad words, and there is on the page sex, so it can't be considered a cozy, but it's not as dark as my Quinn Acosta books. And then I actually have another book coming out in September. It's already done. The second book in the Angel Heart series, which takes place in Phoenix.
Awesome. Elle?
So thriller-wise, we are in, I don't know if you guys had these moments of in the waiting period of agent-publisher discussion, which can go from, a couple weeks of waiting to like half a year. So thriller route, I am just in this purgatory, but it is great. I'm super ready for it to be done, but upbeat. And then romance side. So I write romance under the name Jacqueline Snow. So my third Christmas rom-com comes out this October. It is a marriage in trouble one, which I have been wanting to write forever because of the tension and the angst. And so it opens up where she's like, I can't, she leaves her husband, so she goes and moves back with her parents for a month, and then he has to spend the whole month of December trying to win her back. I think it's actually the best book I've written so far. So that one comes out in October, and then that is the traditional route. So that will be in this bookstore, that will be in bookstores. But then because I got my rights back from when I was a baby author, I didn't know what I was doing, and so I went to smaller publishers, and then I'm slowly getting my rights back to those books, and then I'm republishing them, self-publishing them, and so one comes out in May, and then one comes out in June. Just kind of rapid releasing them. They're both sports romances. I love them, but it was also embarrassing. I don't know if you guys ever do this, but so I wrote these books 6 years ago, and I was reading through them, and I was like, what the hell is this? I felt it was so bad. I was like, where I'm at now compared to where I was then. Right, every time you write, you improve. And so going back, and all of last week, I spent, because it was spring break for my day job, I rewrote almost the entire book. I mean, it's the characters were there, the plot's the same, but I was like, this just doesn't sound like me anymore. And so I rewrote it, added 20,000 words to it, and so I'm really excited for just to own my rights. I got to do a new cover, and so I'm just really excited to re-release that one.
It's saying something that you think it's your best holiday romance because the other two are quite good.
Well, thank you. I know this one's better.
You probably want to stress that, like your other books, this has nothing to do with your real life. Your marriage is not in trouble.
I don't know. We'll just have to give it to my husband. Hey, you should read this. Yeah, absolutely. Again, not an autobiography at all. So.
I think we do have some time for any questions from our audience.
I've got one from Elmore.
Okay. Well, that means the online prize.
Yes.
What?
So they're wanting to know, what is your favorite, do you read books that take place in any foreign countries? Do you have any favorites? And also, Christina, Jane says, good choice.
She does.
Books in other countries.
Books in other countries, yes, Italy. Renaissance Italy, that's for sure. When I'm reading about other countries, generally I'm doing nonfiction because I'm kind of fascinated by the whole other country thing, and I like to read about food. So food's a very important thing, and so I like to read cookbooks too from other countries.
I'll read pretty much anything. I mean, if it's a thriller, there's a lot of international thrillers that take place in other countries. I probably could not describe them to you because I tend to skip over the boring parts, which is a lot of description. I know that's really probably bad to say, but it's like, okay, if you're going to be explaining to me what this cathedral looks like, I'm going to skim you. I'm going to skim the 3 or 4 pages. Which is why I think I never really read historical romance, because they spent so much time describing clothes that I'm like, okay, I got to skip. Okay, this is the good part, and then I would go to the dialogue.
Except, of course, for Christina's historical romance.
I'm sure they're absolutely wonderful. I love her romantic
Sure,
suspense.
she didn't read it, but it's too late.
She is
The horses
a
have a
master of romantic suspense, but no, I haven't read the historicals.
Elle, books in other countries?
I forget the first question. If we read books in other countries? Oh yeah, just any thriller. There's a lot of international travel. And I can't recall like just picking one up that is specifically set in another country. But I do have, one of my goals is, I don't know if it'll ever happen, but I lived in Spain for a year where I taught English, which should not have happened. I'm a terrible, like that is why we have editors, I just like make up words. But no, would love to, so I lived in Barcelona, and so if I ever do see a story that like takes place or they go there, I always pick that up because that was such a special time in my life. And so I could see in some, either thriller or romance, having characters like visit there.
Questions from our audience? And you win the prize because you're the first
No.
question.
No.
Let someone else have the prize.
Okay.
Thank you. My TBR is way too long. So Elle and Allison, you both referenced this, or maybe you brought it up, John, getting your rights back. Will you explain what that means and why it's so important to authors?
Yeah, I can start. Okay. So when you submit your novel to a smaller publisher, or even just any publisher, you essentially sign the rights, the ownership of that manuscript to the publisher. And so there's a time frame. Usually mine was 7 years. Again, I didn't know any better. I don't even know if that might be standard. And so essentially they own the manuscript. They own that story. You can't take elements from it. You can't use characters and to other stories based on what's in the contract. And so because that time frame is up for me, that story will be taken down from their stores. They can't sell, they can't earn anything from it. And then I can do whatever I would like with that story.
Yeah, and my contract, which was pretty standard, is if they sell less than X number of copies in a royalty period, then if they do that for 2 consecutive royalty periods, then you can get I can ask for my rights back. And I think, don't quote me on this, I think it's 300 copies. This is why I don't want anybody to buy these since, because I've been trying to get them back. They've literally sold less than 150 copies per royalty pay period. And now, all my other books, I'll never get the rights back. Fortunately, my backlist sells really, really well, except for those books. So I'm just waiting.
And getting them back would mean what to you?
Well, either I'm going to repackage them and self-publish them, or I'll just take them off the shelves because nobody's reading them. I'm going to take them off the virtual shelves. And because it's not what the sad thing is I love those books. So that's that's kind
So
of
you can self-publish them under a different name?
Yeah, well, no, because I feel deceptive. Because people have already bought the books under that name, and so then I would feel like, do I have to now market them? Yeah, and then people would say, "Oh no, that's Allison Brennan's book." That I don't. It'll be under my name, or I just won't put it out again. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I really, for the most part, I'm just traditionally published, and
Okay. Now you win the prize.
Oh,
'cause you're-
thank you. I don't have to. You all talked about the synopsises, and I've never heard, like, you have to do that before, but you don't, is that standard, but you don't enjoy doing it because you want to figure out how you go along. So none of you necessarily start knowing how your books
I
are
do.
going to, oh, you did?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, with authors, we call them pantsers and plotters, which some
Okay.
people write by the seat of their pants.
Oh, okay.
And
That's why we sat on this side.
Yeah. But what Allison said is absolutely true. Susan Elizabeth Phillips and Jane, I know I've talked about them a lot, Jane and Krantz both sit down and start writing a book. They start with a scenario and they just don't know where it's going. If I did that, I would never be able to write because I would be panicked.
Okay.
But these people do it, and it's just, it's not like there's right or wrong. That's
Okay.
just what it is.
Okay.
All of us are about the same, I think.
Well, no, the synopsis, because I'm going back and forth with my agent on one
Right.
now, is essentially like if you're trying to sell your book to a publisher,
Okay.
that is how they know, especially since I'm newer in the thriller field, like I've only had one, is so they want to be able to show the editor who would buy it, like the story's gonna pay off. Like, is the
Okay.
character arc good enough? Are you missing beats? Like, is this creative? And so essentially in the synopsis, which I hate writing, and I change it from, like, if I can write this beautiful synopsis, I get a deal, then I'm like, just kidding, like, I'm gonna change the story. But that is essentially, is to show, like, you thought through the story, this is the hook. So.
There's also a very practical reason to write a synopsis, is that they usually pay you when you turn it in.
Okay.
So like in my contract,
Okay.
I get paid when I sign the contract, I get paid when I turned in the proposal, which is a synopsis, and then I get paid when I turn in the book,
Okay.
and then when the book is published. So they split it up.
Okay.
And so that's the only reason I write a synopsis, is because they actually give me money for it.
That's a new, I have not experienced that one yet. I'm gonna mention that one.
Thank you.
But how much can you change the actual story? The synopsis is like, you know, in teaching, it's a syllabus, right? That's your contract. For us in science, it's an abstract, right? How much can you actually change the story that results from the synopsis? That's not the jacket, you know, what we read on the jacket about what the story is, that's not that.
Oh,
So is it changeable?
I do not follow the synopsis. I never look at it again. And I learned that from my very first editor, Charlotte Kirscher, who was with Ballantine. And I was writing my third book, and I turned in a synopsis. And I was trying so hard to stick to it, but it just was not working. And I called her and said, I got to change something in the synopsis because this isn't working. And I'm panicking, you know, because I had a deadline. And I was like, and she says, oh, the only reason I made you turn that in is so I could pay you. And I said, I'm never going to look at it again. And I said, oh, thank God. And that freed me for the rest of my career.
That's great.
So.
Other questions?
Can you talk a little bit about your research process? Because all three of you, I feel like, have incorporated a lot of really specific details into your books that are very well thought out and very well researched. And I know I talked to Allison about this a couple days ago, and I loved her research process. So I want to hear more about everybody's.
So the question is, research process is how do you learn to kill people?
Exactly. That is exactly what the question is.
There are so many people I put together. It's not even a problem. It depends on the book. I mean, this book, frankly, is just totally imaginary. I just totally pulled it out of my brain. And the only research I did was about Oakland. And I just wanted to find out if it was still such a really rough place as it was when I was a kid. And yes, it is. Normally, as I said with the Daughter of Montague series, I did a lot of research. The first thing I did was Google, when did Romeo and Juliet take place? And the answer was between the 13th and the 15th century in Verona, Italy. Okay, that's late medieval to early Renaissance. It freed me up completely. Obviously, Shakespeare was writing a totally imaginary story based on a totally imaginary place that it's almost 99% he never went there. And so it put me in the same city. The only research I did really was, again, the food. And what you're talking, the reason I did that was because you're talking about before Columbus discovered America, and you think about Italian food today, we're talking about tomatoes, we're talking about corn, polenta, we're talking about potatoes, gnocchi. I mean, it's just, it wasn't there. So that I had to do research on, and the main research I did, we watched my husband and I, the poor man has had to watch all kinds of stuff. It's called Food and History. It's with the great courses, and it's Ken Albala. And he took it from prehistory all the way up to modern times. And it's fascinating. I loved it.
Else?
You're making me hungry. I'm like, oh, that would be kind of fun. I love research. I've been on ride-alongs. I've gone to the morgue. I've viewed an autopsy. I've toured Quantico. I did SWAT training with the FBI where I got to be a victim and had to lie there. This is why I wish I was young and single, because I had to just lie there with blood coming out of my leg and then they carry me off. It was so much fun, but that was obviously a long time ago when I was a lot skinnier too. But no, I had so much fun doing research because I wanted to be as accurate as possible. And then I don't want it to show on the page because, like I said, remember, if I'm bored, if I'm writing 3 pages of how a gun works, that's boring. You just want to know that the gun is going to go work the way it's supposed to, right? So I do a lot of research, but then I try to minimize it in the books.
This is why Allison writes the scariest books I've ever read.
That's fascinating, especially the FBI.
Yeah.
Training situation.
It's fun.
Mine is really not that exciting. So I mentioned I work in IT, and so specifically for the Tell Me You Trust Me, there's a lot of things that I would just encounter every day in my day job. And then I do have someone who works with me who's like a cybersecurity specialist, and so he is aware of the author life, and so I'll be like, hey, if I wanted to like hack someone. Could you break it down for? I don't want to, but like if I wanted to, and so I will go to him for any of the very specific, like a little bit too far past for me. But yeah, honestly, it's just my job, and so being able to weave the tech aspects I live in into fiction is really fun.
Well, and so I'm 2/3 way done, so I'm ahead of you. No, I'm just kidding. Not that there's a competition. So what I liked about your book was that you seamlessly wove in the tech stuff without it being overbearing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't like reading books where I'm like, it's like a history lesson or it's a, oh, this is a tech issue, this is how a computer works. You know, I want it to be so integrated into the plot, which you did, maybe because that's your job, is that it was seamless so that I didn't feel like it was heavy-handed, that I had to understand how it worked, if that makes any sense.
That was what I was going for, so
Well,
that's great.
Success, A+.
Any other questions? We've got time for one more.
What is the most important aspect of your creative process? Like, what do you feel like you need to create? Yes.
That's a good question. What do
Sorry.
you need to create? In Christina's case, it might be caffeine. I don't know.
What do I need to create? Oh, I'm just, sorry, it just happens. It's just, I've made up stories my whole life. I read books, I make up stories, I write them down. And people always say, you know, I've got a plot for you. It's like, I have a file with 1 million plots. I'm not going to live long enough to write these guys. It's not going to happen. Yeah, no, I only drink tea, John.
Allison?
Well, I write every day. I'm a big proponent of writing every day, and I have since I decided that I was going to get serious about writing. I've always been a writer, but then, you know, I had kids and had a job, and so everything kind of got pushed aside. And then one morning I just said, why am I not writing? And so I just, after my third child was born, I just started writing every morning. And that's kind of been the way I've done my entire career, is I write every single day. I don't say, oh, I have to get 10 pages done, or I have to get one chapter or whatever. I just put in the time and the book is going to get done. And that's kind of been my process.
Elle?
So much kind of like being a pantser. I'm a mood writer, and so one, if you've read the book, I need music, so that's not going to shock anyone. I can put on the same 2 songs on repeat and write an entire book to 1 or 2 songs, because it just gives me, I know that sounds wild, and then I hate the song after. I can't listen to it. So music, and then mine is all mood, and so I definitely give myself enough timeline. Like, I know I can write a full draft in like 4 months, but one weekend will be 10,000 words, and then I'll write 100 words the next day, and then next weekend I'll write 25. Like, I'm very chaotic when I write, because it's right now whenever I can fit it in. Whenever I'm in the mood and I have music is how I write. But I definitely need music.
Can I say one more thing? Allison writes every day. I saw this on Twitter one day. Some guy, writer, said, unless you write every day, you're not a real writer. Which makes me stand up and stomp up and down and go, excuse me, it's a little late to tell me I'm not a real writer. People will come along, writing t-shirts or whatever, and they'll say to you, this is the only way to write a book. If you're writing a book and the pages are coming along, and I don't care how you do it, whether you skip places or whatever, then you're writing a book. That's what you're doing. You're a writer. Don't listen to the people that tell you there's only one way, which Allison did not say that. And she said that's what she does. And so please, if you're writing, don't let people discourage you. It's, you know, just put words on the page and keep rolling.
Well, I mean, I'll say 100%. I completely agree. And the only reason I write every single day is because if I don't write one day, then I won't write the day after. I'm a huge procrastinator.
Okay.
So if I take time off, it takes me twice as long to get back into the story. So that's just more of a me problem than a writing problem. So, but I might not get more than a page done. I just make sure I make sure at least every morning I'm sitting at my computer doing something creative.
And I have friends who say, you know, if you write a page a day, in 365 days you have a book, and it's a good long book. So just write a page a day. That's what you do. That's what you do.
Yeah.
We were going to close it out, but we did get one last question from an up-and-coming writer named Jane Ann Prince.
Oh my God.
And her question for the panel is, what, if anything, surprised you in the course of writing your new book?
The swearing. Jane read Girl Anonymous, which by the way, my husband is calling Girl on a Moose.
That's amazing.
I basically wrote this guy who's in the mafia, and I thought, he's not going to say gosh, oh golly, gee, so he really uses terrible language. I've never ever used language like that in a book before, and there's some people who are not very happy with me about it. But I think the fun part about it is she, as the book goes on, kind of eases him towards actually being civil and learning to speak a little more gently in public.
Allison.
What did I learn about my book? I did the book. So the book has a cult element to it. So I did do a little research on cults and how they get started and why people end up in them and stuff. So that was kind of interesting because I had never written anything related to a cult before. So that's what I learned.
I have two. One is that how often I will just forget a detail that's not relevant. Like there was a scene in the revisions where the food she was eating changed like 3 times in the same chapter. And they're like, you need to pick one. So if the detail did not matter to the plot, but you just had to throw it in, as soon as I did it, my brain would just like forget it. So that was annoying, is how many times I did stuff like that. And the second thing is, this is kind of eerie, is how easy it is to hide stuff online from people. Like, again, just because everything that I wrote in the book, I either experienced or tested out just to see. And like, if you know a little bit about tech stuff, it's pretty easy to just have a secret life, which I don't have. My author life is my secret life. But it's so easy just to deceive people online. And so the ease of it, I think, is what was surprising.
Well, we just had a wonderful time with our 3 authors. Let's go ahead and give them a round of applause. Thank you, virtual audience, for tuning in. If you give us a few minutes, we're going to get the authors set up at a table here. They would be happy to sign books. We do have copies of their books up front. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
You're very complimentary of one another.
Yeah.
That was very nice.
Well, I've read a lot of Christina's books.